Let's go. This was probably actually poll testing our most effective vote.
When it comes to Iraq, America's divided.
On one hand, you've got 2/3 of the American people.
A bipartisan majority in Congress, the Iraq Study Group.
And veterans like us, all opposed to the escalation.
On the other hand, there's George Bush, who supports escalation. If you support escalation, you don't support the troops. Join the troops. Stop the escalation.
That ad ran during the Super Bowl in Maine, Minnesota, and in Washington, D.C.
This is our last one, and I think obviously the most recent. But we've been able to go out and recruit the actual generals who served in Iraq to challenge the administration.
That I will listen to the requests of our commanders on the ground.
Mr. President, you did not listen. You continue to pursue a failed strategy that is breaking our great Army and Marine Corps. I left the Army in protest in order to speak out. Mr. President, you have placed our nation in peril. Our only hope is that Congress will act now to protect our fighting men and women.
Says he listens to his military commanders. Well, Mr. President, I was one of those commanders, and you weren't listening when we warned you of the dangers we'd face invading Iraq. Now our military is overcommitted, and America is less secure. Mr. President, you're being told we need serious diplomacy, not escalation, and you're still not listening. If the President won't listen, Congress must.
It takes a lot for these generals to speak up. I have to tell you, you don't actually ever want to question a war you fought in. That's a hard thing for anybody to go through. I mean, you believed in your country and your leadership. And, you know, my friend's in Iraq right now, and he said to me, he said, hey, John, we just want to know when Congress is going to get us out of here. Because the President has no idea what's going on. He cares more about a political policy than he does about their lives. And they know that. And it's been devastating. And people ask, how do you get these veterans to speak up? And I'll leave you with this story. Because for us, it's personal. See, when you come home, you still think you're a 26-year-old American. But you're not. See, you're not. And no one your age understands that. And one day I go around and I talk at all these events and I say, you know, I'm the guy that got screwed. And this guy, he comes up to me, he came up to me and said, hey, John, I'm going to shake your hand. I said, well, why do you want to shake my hand? He says, because you're an Iraq War veteran. And I said, are you a veteran? And he said, yes, I'm a veteran. I said, well, I want to shake your hand. I said, where did you serve? He says, I served in World War II in the Pacific. And I said, well, I want to shake your hand because you served in World War II in the Pacific. And he said, he looked at me and he said, hey, John, do you know what it means to be a veteran? And I said, I think I know what it means to be a veteran. And he says, let me tell you. He said, when I was a little boy, I went to a parade, and I got to shake the hand of a Civil War veteran. And I said, wow, so I'm shaking the hand of a World War II veteran who shook the hand of a Civil War veteran. And he says, you are. And he said, but you know what that Civil War veteran told me? And I said, what's that? He said, when he was a little boy, he shook the hand of a Revolutionary War veteran. And I said, wow, so I'm shaking the hand of a Civil War veteran. He goes, but you know what it means to be a veteran? And I said, what's that? He says, it means you got more in common with me, or more in common with the Revolutionary War veteran than you probably do with anybody who's your own age. And that's an obligation that all these veterans and these ads feel together, is to bring their stories forward, whether or not we're helping them run for Congress, we're helping them change policy, because we say in the military, you know, don't ever leave a fallen comrade behind it. We can't leave those guys in Iraq without a strategy that works. We can't leave them out there hanging. So we come home, and much like you want to take back America, we weren't political. We were not with you 4 years ago, but we are with you today because you've helped us. Thank you. Front page of the Washington Post, and he was saying, you know, 3,500 soldiers have died. In Vietnam, 58,000 have died. But in Vietnam, 1 out of every 3 soldiers that was wounded in combat died. And now we're only seeing 1 of 8. And now we've got deployments 12 months, not 15 for the Army. So the real hidden casualty here is the post-traumatic stress. And unfortunately, when you go to the doctor and you get a test for cancer or AIDS or anything else, there's like a blood test and a diagnosis. And where we have a tremendous problem is that this administration is too cheap to pay for the people they send to war. Now, they'll give you a tax cut if you're rich. But if you're a veteran and you fight for this country, you come home, they won't quantify you with PTSD. They'll call you adjustment disorder, personality disorder, and then you fall out of the system. And that's why we have homeless veterans. And so these progressive ideals that everybody feels are why we need to take care of our veterans when they get back. And actually, Speaker Pelosi deserves a tremendous amount of credit, so does Congressman Filner, because even the American Legion just sent out a press release last week supporting their budget this year for the VA, because it's the first time in 12 years we've met the independent budget request on money. And that's because the Republicans are too cheap to pay for the troops. And this is a bread and butter issue for the Democrats. They have to push because the president is so cheap, we'll probably veto the thing. And I can't lobby enough with the Congresswoman to just push that stuff through, because the VA is underfunded. We have a diagnosis issue, and it's a tremendous problem.
Thank you, and I'm gonna try to square across.
Diagnosed officially because of the lobbying that the Vietnam veterans had done. The traumatic brain injury is what the gentleman's talking about. It's this new hidden wound of this war. Every war you have new wounds, and really the new wound from this war is this traumatic brain injury. And when you're in combat in Iraq, the most likely way that you'll meet the enemy is on the road, these improvised explosive devices, and the explosions are tremendous. You'll always know if you come onto a fob and you'll see someone with their ears bleeding, you'll know that there was a roadside bomb. And what happens is that when the dust and the shrapnel, a lot of times it shoots up, it can cause head injuries, or people, they fall and they hit their heads. And months later we find out they have this traumatic brain injury, which is an actual brain disorder. And it's you know, I talked to Congressman Filner about it. It's an issue that I think, luckily, the Democratic Congress on the VA is going to look into, and they are aware of it, but quantifying these things and forcing an administration to quantify what TBI is for disability is a true challenge, like it will be for post-traumatic stress.
Thanks. I'm going to go, Stacy.
Unfortunately, after Vietnam, we created a system where we could not deploy without the National Guard and Reserves. But their specialties were absolutely required for deployment. So every time there's war, you will have National Guard and Reserves, yet their benefits are much less. The second issue is the most important issue she brought up, which is that there was George Bush likes to go around and says, I gave every veteran health care 2 years after they returned. Well, since you were in Texas during Vietnam, let me explain to you, your war never started, our war never ends. So, it's true. So what happens is these guys come back, and for 2 years, when I walked into the VA, and it took me 8 months to walk in there and tell a nurse, I said to her, you know, she goes, what's wrong with you? And I said, I don't know, but I'm not who I used to be. And she's like, well, you came to the right place. And because I went within the first 2 years of returning from war, being on active duty, not having health care, the VA gave me coverage. But after 2 years, you don't have that same access to those VA facilities unless you have a claim. So the bottom line is that if you're wounded in combat or you serve in Iraq or Afghanistan, you should always be able to walk into the VA for health care. But like I said,
and actually that goes to a good idea.